Okay, so we'll get started. Hey guys, welcome to another webinar session by Moolya. So this particular webinar is very interesting and very close to what is about Android development and a lot more things about Android. It's going to be very interesting. Soham, who has been helping us, he actually um, he has a company called TBS, which is basically an app for voice recording, and he has got about 1 million downloads. And he is also working with a lot of companies. He's been consulting us with our performance monitoring SDK, and he's a big community guy. We are extremely happy, and it's a pleasure to have Soham on board. So I hope everybody goes on mute. I think until unless Soham asks us to unmute yourself and talk about it. So you guys can go on mute. And then we'll wait for more participants. I think they'll continue to join over the minutes coming up. So welcome, Soham. And you're a host, and then you can take it forward.
Cool. Thank you, Abhilash. Thank you for the kind words, and really excited to take this session on Android development and testing, especially in this post-COVID kind of world, right? So interesting times, and thank you for joining.
Yeah.
So quick introduction to myself. I'm a founder and partner at Trivius, and we've worked on a lot of different applications over the past few years. We have our own audio recording application that Abhilash was talking about. It has more than 1 million downloads, has been featured on the Play Store. But apart from that, we do a lot of consulting on UX, product, and tech. Okay? Over the past few years, we've worked on a lot of different applications across every domain. I'm also an organizer with BLR Android, and I'm very, very passionate about Android as a platform. And over the past few years, again, working with a lot of companies has given us a lot of insight on Android development. So these are just some of the companies we work with. Historically, we work a lot with Google on various products in India and across the world. We work on fintech products with Coursera, we work with startups like Meesho. We worked on design projects with IDEO. We've worked also on various rural and very India-focused apps like Intersect. Right? And like Abhilash was talking about, we've also worked with Moolya on various performance tools. Today's talk will touch a lot upon my experience and our experience in building such applications. How can we build better applications, right? And why performance, quality, all these things are also very, very important. So this is the agenda for today. I won't really deep dive into Android application development. So it's not going to be a very technical walkthrough in that way, right? What I will do is kind of tell you about the evolution of the mobile phone, right, as a smartphone device. I'll also talk about the mobile smartphone development and testing scene in 2020, especially in this post-COVID world. Also, I will talk about why the mobile phone is so important to the Indian user as of today, especially in such lockdown kind of circumstances. I'll talk about Android, give you an introduction to the platform itself, talk about the entire framework. I'll also give you a brief introduction into how you can develop Android apps. I'll also talk about testing on Android. Right? What are some of the challenges you can face there and how you can go about testing? What are the various strategies you can adopt? Finally, I'll talk about some of the problems facing the industry right now. Right? Talk about performance, quality, and some of the other aspects that I think as an industry we need to focus on. And finally, I'll share some of my tips and tricks and some closing thoughts, right, on the entire mobile smartphone scene. So let's begin by looking at the evolution of the entire smartphone scene, just to give you some context of where we are right now. So essentially, back in June 2007, first iPhone was released. Of course, before that, there were a lot of smartphones. Right? I'm not saying iPhone was the first smartphone, but essentially it started this huge revolution about like having full screen as a platform to deliver content, services, and applications. Right? So that happened way back in June 2007. Of course, there were various players before that. But today I would like to start with the iPhone as the base framework. A year after that, right, September 2008, Android 1.0 was launched. Not even sure if you guys are aware of a device called the HTC Dream. It was the first device with the Android operating system, which was publicly available. A year after that, actually, we started this Android community called Bangalore Android User Group. Now it's called Villa Drive, but we called it BAUG back in the day. Since October 2009, we've conducted over 115 events. So we're a very active community. We really believe in this organization. So what we do is we talk about various things that are related to Android, and we've gotten together, Google, all the smartphone manufacturers, all the app developers, all different people in the ecosystem. We come together and we talk about Android. And we've done a lot of different events. In case you're interested in talking more about Android or deep diving into that, please attend our events. We're also doing digital webinars just like this in the past few months. Now, since 2007 and 8 to 2019, a lot has happened, right? Let's fast forward to 2019. And today, right, Android has over 94% market share in India. So if you're looking at building an application or service in India, Android should be at the very center of that entire strategy. So Android is not just about Google, right? I will talk about that in a little more detail later. But essentially, it's an entire technology stack. There are various parts to Android, various components. And there are various players in this component. It's called the Open Handset Alliance. Right? There are smartphone manufacturers, there are chip vendors, there are hardware, like camera sensor vendors. Right? There are partners in the community, there are app developers, there are OEMs. So there are tons of people who are making Android successful. It's not just Google. Right? And since 2008, there have been over 29 major revisions of Android. It's a very popular, very fast-moving operating system and a framework. And the entire Android's source code, right, is part of the Android open source project. And because it's so open in nature, right, there have been a lot of other use cases. Android has been used in washing machines and TVs and cars, right, across the board because of the open nature of Android and the capabilities it provides. Okay. So that was till 2019, right? And I call this the first mobile revolution. It's not just in 2019 specifically, but over the past few years, right, Android and mobile phones in general have been extremely popular. So why? Because for a lot of people, especially in India, right, mobile phones were their first computing device. Right? A lot of people have not used laptops, desktops. They don't know about computers. Mobile phones are the first time they're actually using something that is processing things and gives them access to the internet. Right? And this gives them access to a lot of knowledge and opportunity. Right? And there are this concept of applications and services that are provided through these mobile phones. So this has happened, right, over the past few years. So it's an immense revolution, right, because of the access to the internet, of connectivity, and cheap smartphones. This has really been an amazing journey. Right? I call this a first mobile revolution. But in 2020, I feel, before 2020, people were thinking, okay, mobile is kind of slowly, dying off, or it's just being stagnant, and there's not a lot of progress in that. I would disagree with that, but in 2020, I think a lot of things have changed, which is I call the renaissance of mobile platforms. And actually, instead of slowly tapering off, mobile platforms are becoming even more important as time moves forward. Right? I think technology and especially mobile phones, mobile platforms have a very key role to play in this COVID or post-COVID world from 2020 onwards. Right? And that is what I would like to highlight to you. There's so much opportunity that's happening even in 2020 in this mobile world. So I call this the mobile renaissance. It's the second revolution, right, of this mobile world, and it's happening because of COVID-19. Right, people are at home, they're in lockdown. They might have access to TV or some other kind of communication, but most of the time, for a large part of India, these mobile phones are sometimes people's only access to information and opportunities. It's their only way out. And that's why mobile phones have become a very key part of this entire puzzle of a post-COVID world. It's a key tool for governments, for businesses, and for users, right? It's at the intersection of all these three elements in this ecosystem. So let me highlight that by kind of telling you how important this mobile platform is, right, in various areas, in various sectors. And what do I mean by renaissance? Right? So what I want you to take away from this session is that if you are kind of building a product or you're building a kind of a strategy in 2020, you have to keep mobile phones at the center of that entire strategy, right? If you're talking about that. So let me talk about different sectors and how the mobile phone has impacted those sectors in 2020. Let's talk about healthcare first. Right? So healthcare has completely changed in the post-COVID world, right? Before COVID, we used to really frown upon telemedicine, and it was like in those gray areas, right? There were applications like Practo and DocSapp, which were experimenting with telemedicine online, but it was not generally encouraged. Right? People were not encouraged to seek medical advice online. But in this post-COVID world, telemedicine is taking a huge turn for the better. Right? People are consulting doctors, mental health physicians, or dietitians. All of that consulting is happening online on mobile platforms. It's a very, very important change, right? And there are applications at the very center of the entire government strategy of tackling COVID, right? So one of these applications is called Arogya Setu, which helps the government track, COVID patients and help define and curate the entire spread of COVID across certain areas. And it helps kind of notify people that if they're in a certain zone where COVID is spreading. Right? So mobile phones are not just an enabler, it's in fact at the very core of the entire government strategy of fighting this virus. Apart from Arogya Setu, a lot of other companies have changed their strategy and put mobiles at the very center of the entire strategy, right? I'll take the example of CureFit, right? Initially, it was just like, about healthcare and kind of fitness, right? And providing food to your doorstep. But now, because of certain changes in their strategy and because of COVID, they have changed their entire setup so that you can now access doctors on the same platform, right? And it's just super easy, super convenient, and safe. Right? So you'll be seeing a lot of such apps like Practo, DocSapp, and so on, changing their strategies and trying to adopt mobile in a very, very big way. Let's talk about fintech, right? So today, when everybody is in lockdown, right, you're not able to access people. So as part of the relief efforts from the government side, the government, the Prime Minister has kind of allocated money to be given to poor people across India in certain sectors, right? If that was the case, right, if we didn't have lockdown, we would be able to go and deliver that money to that person directly. Right? But because of this COVID world, because of lockdowns, you cannot go and physically give money to other people, right? So this is where the entire infrastructure investment that the government has made over the past few years, the entire Aadhaar concept and kind of the ability to debit money directly into somebody's account from the government side has kind of revolutionized the entire financial space, right? Even the finance minister the other day was talking about how Aadhaar, and even the Prime Minister was talking about how Aadhaar has enabled the government to directly debit bank accounts across India without ever needing to go to a bank or anything else. It's completely electronic, completely transparent, right? And that's where various players, right, are kind of making the most of it, right, and in helping these people across India. So Novopay is one such solution, right, where people in villages don't really have access to ATMs or banks, especially during these times, right? So Novopay is offering the ability to withdraw cash in a mobile way, right? Using a micro ATM, which is like a mobile-based kind of ATM solution, right? It's a very, very interesting approach. Instead of you having to go to a town and then get access to an ATM, right, with your debit card, your money can come to you. And especially for people in rural India and tier 3 India, this is revolutionary, right? You don't have to step out in all this lockdown. It's just completely so transparent and easy. And this is changing the face of fintech in India. Right? And apart from that, today a lot of effort is being made for financial inclusion. So people in rural India, tier 3 and 2 towns, are getting access to capital and financial instruments like never before. There are various other startups like Kaleidofin, Carva, and so on, which are providing unprecedented opportunity in financial services all through the mobile phone. Let's talk about commerce, right? And I'm talking about all kinds of commerce, not just e-commerce, but social commerce as well. Apps like Meesho are really revolutionizing how women and people in general are doing commerce, right? It's not just apps like Flipkart, which are doing commerce on a specific app. Apps like Meesho are enabling women to have their own small shops on WhatsApp. It's a very, very interesting model. And today, more than ever, right, all these online commerce platforms like Flipkart, Myntra, whether it be even delivery of medicines, right? All these kind of commerce platforms like 1mg, First Cry, right, are really changing the face of commerce in such a troubling time. We talk about local, right? For a lot of people who don't have kitchens at their home, who are not able to get access to food, right? Local services like Danzo, Fred, Swiggy, and so on are providing some opportunity for filling their stomachs. Right? So they have also changed how they operate, right? In terms of temperature checks, sanitization, usage of masks, contactless delivery. So we're seeing a lot of innovation in the local space as well. And all of this is driven by COVID and is kind of changing the entire landscape, right? When we talk about local commerce as well. Fitness, right? It's one of the services and the sectors which has been most hit by COVID, right? Most of the gyms and fitness centers are all closed, and we don't see them opening, right? Anytime soon. This is where companies like CultFit, which were actually hugely dependent on these physical outlets, are changing the strategy. Today, you can attend these live classes or recorded classes from the ease of your home, right? And a couple of weeks back, I attended these live classes. It's really something to kind of attend to understand how much innovation they're offering over here. So, for example, in these live classes offered by CureFit, they actually monitor you, right? There's a very basic kind of monitoring system through the camera, which tells you if you're doing the exercise properly, how you're doing, how you're competing with the other people in the class. It's a very interesting concept, right? So we see a lot of innovation happening in the fitness space, like by CureFit and Healthified. Next, the education sector, right? Again, classes are closed, colleges are closed. So how do we get knowledge, right, in such an environment? That's where we see a lot of innovation happening in the education sector, right? So one of the examples I would like to talk about is Unacademy. Right? So Unacademy is where you can go and enroll in various kind of classes, and they have the best teachers across the country teaching live classes. So today, when you're not able to go to your class, to your tuition, or any of the other facilities that you would take for granted, you have access to education through Unacademy, right? And it's not just Unacademy. You can, there's so many other apps, right? With the internet and with your smartphone. Today, you can learn so much, even under such circumstances. And companies are constantly innovating, right? So we see companies like Unacademy even doing like very kind of interesting classes from like Virat Kohli, Sachin Tendulkar, Anushka Sharma, Brian Lara, and so on, right? So it's a very interesting time. Right? People are trying to innovate and kind of inspire people, right? Right from the comfort of their homes. So hopefully I gave you a picture of the kind of revolution that's going on, right, in the mobile industry and across sectors, right, thanks to all these constraints that we're living under. Right? So today, the question that I would like to post over here, right, why is the mobile phone so important today? And going back, right, if you look at the average Indian consumer, right, today, typically for them, for a lot of these people, right, mobile phones are the only accessible mediums of communication, right? It's accessible because it's affordable, right? A lot of people have access to smartphones. It's connected to the internet at all time and gives them access to so much local information, right? Local, all kinds of information. It gives you access to knowledge, it gives you access to opportunities, right? If you're looking for a job, if you're looking for what's happening in your locality, right? How can you contribute to this? There's so much information that you can get from a mobile phone, right? Unlike other places, this is the only way you can get this information, right? It's also extremely personalized in nature, right? That means that, right, all the information that you're consuming is based on what is tailored for you, right? It's not information for anybody else. So the entire information is extremely personalized and useful. Okay, and there's also a huge sense of community, right, over here. What do I mean by that, right? So this is the only time that that you're not able to go and physically meet people, right? So there's a very, lack of community in the physical sense, right? So the mobile phone lets you communicate to all these people, right? Even during these times of lockdowns, right? So you can contact people on WhatsApp, on Facebook, right? And it's increased this sense of community even in these tough times. And finally, like if you're building a solution in any of these sectors that I talked before, right? Could be in healthcare, could be finance, right? If you're building a solution today, you really have to target the Android platform, right? And the Android platform gives you the entire reach and capability, right? So if you're building a platform today, if you're building an application today and you launch it on Android, you get access to the millions and billions of people on Android, right? Instantly. You don't have to make any additional effort over there. So with that, hopefully that kind of gave you a picture of why the mobile ecosystem is so important, and why is the mobile phone so important today, especially during the lockdown times, and why it's important to look at Android, right, as a platform for kind of fulfilling all the ambitions and strategies that you or your company might have. So let's give you an introduction to Android, right, and what it's capable of. Right? I've told you the kind of the app side of things, right? What are the entire company is doing, but let me talk to you about the development and the testing side. So Android itself is not just about applications, right? It's about a lot of different things. So this is called the Android framework, and it has a lot of different steps in it, right? A lot of different layers. At the very bottom is this entire Linux kernel layer, right? This is where the Android device, whether it be a smartphone, it could be a washing machine, it could be a microwave, anything, right? So if it's interacting with any kind of hardware, this is where the Linux kernel comes in, right? And it speaks to the hardware. And there is a lot of innovation, a lot of work being done in the Linux kernel level. This is where you have audio drivers who are connecting speakers and actually making sound. You have the display drivers, right, where you're displaying stuff, right? Or you talk about Bluetooth, right, when you're making Bluetooth connections, right? So this is where you're actually writing the drivers, right? And there are lots of other people contributing to this part. Above the Linux kernel is the hardware abstraction layer, where a lot of people contribute to kind of simplifying the connection with the hardware, right? So as an app developer, you don't really have to worry about the hardware, right? So this hardware abstraction layer abstracts a lot of that functionality so that you can just worry about your features and not really worry about how, how the audio driver is. On top of the hardware abstraction layer, you have certain libraries like WebKit, which lets you build browser-related functionalities, right? You have the Android runtime. You have OpenGL, which gives you graphics capabilities. So these libraries make your life easier by providing a lot of functionality on top of these native like hardware layers. On top of that is your Java framework, which gives you a lot of additional functionality with respect to things that you really care about, right? Like location, like notifications, like the database, right? So this is something that's maintained by Google primarily. And the top of all of this is your system applications, right? Or your applications. You can talk about calendar, you can talk about camera, you can talk about email, right? If you're building any kind of applications, you would be at that layer, right? So this is the entire Android framework. And when we talk about Android, we typically, refer to the top layer itself, right? But that's not always true, right? So Android is more than applications, right? And when I'm talking about opportunity in the Android sphere, it could be at any level, right? It could be at the hardware level, or the Linux kernel level, or the native libraries level, or the Java framework level, right? But today we're going to focus on the topmost layer, right? How do we build applications that can leverage the entire framework, right? And of course, feel free to check out all the opportunities across the stack. So let's look at how can you develop apps. And again, I will not go into the details of how you develop apps. I will just talk about the various languages that are available. Again, we don't have enough time to go into the nitty-gritties. There are lots of excellent Android videos or tutorials that are available online that can help you develop these apps, right? I will talk about some of the strategies you can adopt, right? What is the general strategy that you should look at? So traditionally, Java has been the most popular development language for Android. So most of the applications that you see traditionally have been built on a Java code base. But more recently, Kotlin has been becoming really popular. So if you're thinking of being an Android developer, Kotlin is probably the best way to go. It's a very interesting, a very powerful language. And if you're a game developer, or if you're developing something which requires a lot of performance, C++ is the best way to go. And you can run native C++ code on Android itself. So most of the games that you see, on Android are running natively in C++, and that's how it runs, very, very similar to how it runs on any other platform like iOS. But apart from these native, development languages, you could also look at a cross-platform approach. Now, cross-platform has been there for a while, but these are some of the newer entries. Of course, React Native has been there for around a while, and Facebook is the kind of power behind React Native, and they have done a lot of good work in promoting React Native. So you might have seen a lot of React Native apps which are out there. Flutter is a new entrant into this entire cross-platform framework thing, and it is a framework that has been pushed by Google. And so you see a lot of support coming from Google's side, and it's actually a really interesting framework and provides a lot of functionality without very less performance benefits, right? Typically, when you're looking at any kind of cross-platform framework, there are a lot of compromises that you have to deal with. But with platforms like Flutter, right, it's much easier to get that level of performance without sacrificing the cross-platform capabilities. So apart from that, you have a lot of the traditional cross-platform frameworks like PhoneGap, Cordova, Xamarin, and so on, right? So these are traditional cross-platform frameworks that you might be familiar with, right? These also are ways to develop Android apps, right? So today you don't have to go and focus on only one route, right? So traditionally we're just looking at Java or maybe Java plus Kotlin, right? But today I would definitely recommend that you look at various other options, right? Like Flutter or React Native, right? Because those frameworks today are also very, very powerful and very, very functional. In fact, you don't really have to compromise on a lot of things to create a good Android application, right? So today you have lots of options. You don't have to be constrained to Java or Kotlin. So with that, hopefully I've given an overview of how to get started with Android development. So in case you're interested in, let's say, Kotlin or Java or Flutter or React Native, there are lots of tutorials which are available and which will get you started on Android development with that, right? Now let's look at testing on Android, right? So I want to give you an overview of testing as a developer, so you have a good idea of how to think in terms of testing on Android. So let me try and classify testing on Android, right? So this is the typical classification that a developer does when we talk about Android testing. So there are three types of tests, right? You have unit tests, you have integration tests, and you have end-to-end tests, right? And this entire thing on the right-hand side, this diagram is called the testing pyramid. So I'll talk about unit, integration, and end-to-end tests in an upcoming slide. Now, apart from this, there are also other ways of classifying testing. You can have black box testing or white box testing. Black box testing is, of course, when you don't really know what you're testing. It's a complete black box. right? And it's completely opaque, right? You don't know what's going on inside, right? So an example of this is, let's say you have to, you're testing an application and you want to test an integration with a third-party application like WhatsApp. Now you don't know what's happening in WhatsApp, right? But still you have to do that testing. That's where it's black box testing. White box testing is when you know what's going on inside, right? When you're testing a feature of your own application. So let's talk about unit testing first. So in unit testing, what we try to do as a developer is we try to test small units of code, right? Even examples. If you're building a feature where you're validating an email address, right? What are you trying to test? You're trying to test if I enter an email address, is the email address valid or not, right? So that simple validation is basically testing it in unit. So if I'm trying to validate that, I will try to provide various kinds of inputs, right? I can say I will validate it with a null input or an empty input, and it should fail, right? I should try to validate it with, let's say Soham. I should validate it with Soham add, right? I will give it all kinds of different inputs, and all those inputs, it should give me the right output. At the very fundamental level, that is unit testing, right? You're essentially testing business logic, and you're not testing external dependencies like the internet, right? I'm not testing if I'm clicking on that button, what will happen to that email? Will it be sent? I don't care about it. I don't care about any kind of external dependencies like internet, like databases, or even UI for that matter. Now, I'll not go into the details of unit testing, but if you want to explore unit testing on Android, I would look at various options, like RoboElectric is one option, or JUnit, right? JUnit is like the standard for unit testing on Android, or on Java mostly. And you know, it's very popular in Android as well. So RoboElectric as well as JUnit is very, very popular. And there are also frameworks like Mockito and Parmock, which lets you mock, right, external dependencies like a network or like a database and so on. Okay. Now, instrumentation testing or end-to-end testing is where you're testing user behavior, dependencies, or integration, right? Units are individual small pieces of code. And when you integrate, right, and once you've tested those individual units, you're assuming those will work. So when you integrate all of this, right, then you will kind of test the integration part or the end-to-end functionality. Okay, so you're testing integration, you're testing dependencies. So in unit testing, you're not testing any kind of external dependency, right? Like the internet connectivity, databases, or whatever, right? But in instrumentation or end-to-end testing or functional testing, we're testing the entire flow, right? And there are lots of options for this on Android. For white box testing options, we have Espresso, Robotium, Selenium, and so on. Right? Even at Moolya, we're in Apache, we're using a bunch of these solutions. And in Android Studio, there are various ways of recording, right? End-to-end test. So you click on a button, go to a certain screen, the entire flow is recorded. And all these tests can be run in the cloud using Firebase Test Lab or Apache, right? And if you're looking at black box testing, let's say you have an app, right? It's like it's an audio recording app, and you are sharing that recording with some other person, right? You push test the sharing functionality. When you're sharing with WhatsApp, you don't have visibility into how WhatsApp is behaving, right? So that's where you know, that kind of integration with WhatsApp can be done by UI Automator, which is the black box testing tool in Android, right? With UI Automator, you can test anything. You can test any other external app, right? Because you're just testing it as a black box. Now, going back to my slide on the testing pyramid. Now that we know what is unit testing or integration testing, end-to-end testing, full functional testing, Google recommends in this blog post that 70% of your tests should be purely unit tests, right? So you should test all these individual units of code very, very efficiently. Then 20% of your tests should be integration tests. So once you've tested these individual units, you combine them. That's when you call it integration testing. And finally, full end-to-end flows, right? Like user behavior, like button clicks and everything. The entire flow should be 10% of your overall testing strategy, right? As a developer. So I just wanted to give you a developer's perspective on the entire testing strategy, right? So 70, 20, 10 is what Google recommends. But having a good unit and integration test is a very, very important part of the entire kind of testing strategy. Coming back, right? Also want to quickly show you this graphic on the right-hand side, right? So some comparison between unit and end-to-end tests, right? So unit tests are very, very fast because you're testing that small piece of code. End-to-end tests, because they depend on the internet or the databases and so on, they take a lot of time. It takes minutes or hours to run instrumentation or end-to-end tests, right? So in that way, end-to-end tests are much lower. Unit tests are far more reliable because there are no external dependencies, right? So things will behave exactly the way it's supposed to, right? Whereas in end-to-end tests, there are so many dependencies, right? The internet, like something else, right? Like hundreds of things, and therefore, any one of those things failing might cause a test to fail, right? So for no fault of yours, maybe the server is down, the internet is down, and your test might just like not work. Right? So therefore, it's not that reliable. It's also difficult to isolate failures in end-to-end tests. What do I mean by that, right? Let's say if login is failing for a certain functional workflow, you don't really know if it's because of the server, because of a problem in the code, or because of internet connectivity. It could be any one of those things. Whereas in unit tests, it's very easy to say, okay, this is the fault, this is what I'm testing, it's failing because of this. Right? And finally, when we talk about real user behavior, that is something you cannot do with unit testing, right? Because unit testing is only designed for small units of code. And end-to-end testing is designed for user behavior. Right? User will do something like this, they'll click here, they'll enter the details and move on. Okay. So with this, I would like to kind of conclude this presentation and talk about my closing thoughts. So we've talked about the entire kind of opportunity in the Android ecosystem. There's so much you can do, right? You can have build solutions in the healthcare space, in the fintech space. You can talk about Android development. You can today build cross-platform apps that are very, very performant. And there's so much you can do, right? You can write tests for them. But even after all of that, right, I feel there are a couple of really important problems I would like to highlight in the industry. The first problem is in terms of app quality, right? And initially it was, there was a lot about the quantity of apps, right? How many apps are we developing as India? But today it's all about quality, right? So many apps are coming out in each domain. Are we kind of building the quality of apps that we would like to? I don't think so, right? Because performance is such a big constraint, right? We have people having so many different kinds of phones. You have low-end phones, you have high-end phones, you have like a 5-year-old phones, right? So performance means that the app works properly on all these different phones, and you're thinking about that constantly, right? And even there's a lot of problems in apps code quality, right? Developers are not thinking in the right way, right? They're not thinking at the right time, and therefore there's a lot to be designed as far as code quality is concerned as well. So all of this adds up to apps that are not really performing, that lag on every single phone, right? And kind of stutter and give you a really bad experience. Right? That's where I think most developers and testers really need to focus and kind of work towards building really high quality apps. I think that's the number one problem facing the industry today. The second area of concern is designing products that are designed for a certain audience, right? So today we're building so many apps, but most of them are not really designed for India. So what I mean by designing for India, right? I'm talking about apps that are offline first, right? Internet connectivity is a huge constraint in India, even after Jio, right? So we're talking about apps where people will basically switch off their internet connection most of the time. So 98% of the day, most people will switch off the internet connection and just use the phone as is. So is your app going to work in at least a basic way during that time, right? Right. So that is something that you have to think really upfront, right? If you look at a lot of really major apps, even today, right, they are not thinking offline first. If you switch off internet, you don't have access to internet, there's nothing that you can do, right? And that is something which is super important to consider. Another really important part is tech adoption. We have so many apps out there, right? Like Flipkart, PhonePe, Google Pay, so many other apps which are trying to solve really important things like Amazon, Swiggy, and so on, right? But we might have those apps installed on our phones, but are all of us comfortable transacting on those platforms? Just think for a second, right? For example, I have parents and they might have the Flipkart or the Paytm apps installed on their phones. But if I have to ask myself, are they comfortable actually making a transaction on Flipkart? the answer to that probably would be no, right? Because a lot of things there, right, like concepts like search and so on are not really concepts that are familiar to a certain audience, right? So we have to look at tech adoption and how people are more confident in kind of transacting online through these apps. And so that is another huge challenge. Finally, in India, I feel that a lot of people lack user research and user experience expertise, right? So we're just building apps one after the other, not really talking to our users or considering UX or UI first, right? They just want to quickly build a solution, and they don't focus on the problem that much. They don't focus on users or stakeholders, right? That is another problem that I see in the industry. So with that said, I would like to close and say that there is, still, despite all the things I've said, I think there is tremendous opportunity in this platform, right? Even 10 years in. There are lots of Android developers and testers, to be very honest, but very, very, very few are really good at it, right? That's where the opportunity lies. You can get started very easily. There's unprecedented amount of documentation, videos, and so on. But it's, we're lacking the few good people, right? Few people take the time, effort to make good, high quality application. That's where I feel like we have a tremendous amount of opportunity. And I think Moolya can also really contribute to that amazing goal. Now, Android as a platform has a lot of gotchas, right? A lot of challenges in the platform. You have to be aware of that. Right? So many different devices and OS levels, right? About 29 different versions, a lot of fragmentation, right? So how do you build applications and how do you test them, keeping all these constraints in mind, right? Especially in India, where connectivity is poor, people are not able to adopt these platforms, right? So there's a lot of challenges, and very few people, very few good developers and testers are thinking of it like that, right? And all that said, it's tremendous opportunity, right? If you're building an application or testing it, today there is so much opportunity across the board, right? And you can scale distribution, and if you launch something on the Play Store, you can get like millions and billions of downloads, right? One of the tips that I would give to people to kind of get better at what they're doing is to leverage the community, right? Attend webinars like this, ask questions, meet developers, right? And always be curious, right? I have learned more from the community and events, meetups, and so on than any kind of YouTube, right? So leverage the community, understand and kind of learn from what other people are doing, and then kind of become better at what you do. Right. With that said, I think I'll close my presentation. I'm super thankful to Moolya for giving this opportunity to make this presentation.